Moscow is humiliated. Russia's so-called superweapons have failed, publicly, brutally, irreversibly. As Ukrainian drones strike back in revenge, hitting deeper and harder, nature itself joins the punishment. Russia is freezing, blinded and paralyzed. Meanwhile, powerful weapons are pouring into Ukraine from every direction. Air defenses lock the skies, artillery strikes deeper. Behind closed doors, the nightmare for the Kremlin grows even worse. Peace is no longer negotiated, it's imposed. Security guarantees are being written at lightning speed across the Atlantic. Putin is disgraced, cornered and trapped. What the Kremlin promised as unstoppable power has collapsed on the battlefield. Near Pokrovsk, Russia launched a massive assault and it was wiped out. The Russian army is cracking in real time and the world is watching. This is where the war turns. Let's break down what's happening right now. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. Maria Farafonova here with the latest updates. Putin has set a course towards self-destruction. A strike launched right near the borders of the EU and NATO, the infamous Oreshnik, fired at Ukraine. The Lviv region shook, but there's a catch. Shocking details have surfaced. The so-called Oreshnik was launched without a warhead, another humiliation for Moscow. What was meant to be a terrifying show of force turned into an outright failure. Even Russian audiences can no longer hide their rage. Domestic channels are tearing apart the dictator's grand plans, calling the launch a disgrace.
These gathered a council at a long square table. The top leadership of the country. They sat, poked at a map, and decided where to the missile without a warhead for several tens of millions.
Meanwhile, official Moscow is scrambling to mask the scale of the fiasco, branding the launch as retaliation for a fabricated attack on the dictator's residence. The Kremlin insists it proved its capabilities despite the obvious collapse of the narrative.
The Russian armed forces launched a massive strike with long-range land and sea-based high-precision weapons, including the Oreshnik medium-range mobile ground-based missile system.
According to Ukraine's Air Force, the launch was carried out from the Kapustin Yar test range in Russia's Astrakhan region. The missile that struck toward Ukraine's Lviv region was traveling at a speed of approximately 13,000 kilometers per hour. The consequences of the strike are still being assessed. Lviv Mayor Andriy Sadovey reported that an automatic gas safety system was triggered in the village of Rudne within the Lviv community. But karma exists, and it looks like nature itself tries to punish the aggressor country. Moscow has been buried under snow. The ruthless Balkan cyclone slammed into Russia's capital, bumping record-breaking snowfall and paralyzing the entire city. Nature itself delivered a brutal show of force. This snowbound hell has to be seen to be believed.
Taking into account the recent snowfalls, Moscow has already received approximately 23% of the monthly precipitation norm for January, and in some areas of the Moscow region, particularly Kashira, more than half of the monthly norm has fallen.
There are already 30 centimeters of snow on the streets of Moscow and the surrounding region, and this is only the beginning.
Due to the persistent snowfall in the Moscow region, snowdrift height records could be broken. They are expected to reach 65 centimeters.
A full-scale transport apocalypse is unfolding right now. Russians are struggling just to get outside, cars are stuck in residential country yards, and snow is knee-deep inside public transport. The sky over Russia has turned into a deadly trap. More than 180 flights have been delayed or cancelled at Moscow airports due to the severe storm. Moskowites appear trapped. Even Russia's municipal services are unprepared to fight the snow. Life in the capital has officially been put on pause.
Public utility workers went to fight the snow apocalypse in Moscow and got stuck in the snow themselves.
Ukraine's drones are striking back as well. Ukraine's strike plunged Russia's Belgorod region into darkness and cold, leaving 500,000 people without electricity and heating. Belgorod governor Vyacheslav Gladkov admitted severe damage to critical infrastructure after key facilities were hit: the Storozhevaya substation and the Luch combined heat and power plant. The scale of the fallout is staggering. 556,000 residents across the 6 municipalities are without power and heat. Heating has been cut in 1,920 apartment buildings, and nearly 200,000 people are left without water and sewage services. And the crisis didn't stop there. After the blackout, Belgorod plunged into fuel chaos as long lines snaked around gas stations. Many of those waiting are residents of private homes, desperately buying gasoline to keep their generators running and their houses alive. The damage is spreading further. Several missiles also struck the Orol thermal power plant. As a result, the city is now facing serious disruptions to electricity, water supply and heating. Western partners are once again reinforcing Ukraine with weapons. The United Kingdom has completed the delivery of 13 Raven air defense systems, which are already in service with Ukrainian units and significantly strengthening the country's air defenses. The appearance of these systems in Ukraine was first discussed back in 2023. Later, Ukraine's Air Force demonstrated their operation without disclosing details. More information emerged last year. In May 2025, it was reported that Ukraine already had 8 Raven systems, with 5 more officially announced. It has now been confirmed that this additional batch has been delivered, and the entire transfer process took about 7 months from announcement to deployment.
So we can cautiously assume that an additional batch of Raven air defense systems may be ordered for Ukraine.
In addition, London has provided 2 prototype Grave Hawk air defense systems to protect Ukraine's critical infrastructure from long-range Russian strikes. A total of 15 Grave Hawk systems are expected. The enemy has been warned. Meanwhile, the situation on the front line does not look good for Russia. Ukraine's armed forces have repelled a massive Russian assault near Pokrovsk, and this is far from the last piece of bad news for the enemy. More details on what is unfolding along the line of contact coming up next.
The Russians have lost another oil depot. Telegram channels are showing videos of a fire in Stary Oskol, Belgorod region. In less than a week, from January 2nd to January 7th, Ukrainian drone forces managed to strike 9 strategic targets on Russian territory and another 7 in temporarily occupied areas of Ukraine.
The latest strikes by Ukraine's defense forces on the territory of the occupying country demonstrate the continued success of the tactic of targeting oil refineries in the Russian Federation, with the aim of reducing the occupiers' ability to finance active military operations in Ukraine.
Not just by air, fighters of the 225th Separate Assault Regiment have eliminated more than 2 brigades of the Russian army in 2025 alone.
Just in the past 24 hours, the occupying forces have lost about 1,400 personnel. The total losses of the Russian occupation forces in 2025 are estimated by the Ukrainian intelligence community at approximately 450,000. Therefore, we can say that the losses of the occupation army are catastrophic, even for the Russian army. It is particularly noteworthy that the total number of contract soldiers in the year 2025 is significantly, indeed remarkably less, according to the Russian side's very own official estimates, than the substantial losses of Russian troops in the ongoing conflict in Ukraine.
More cancelled contracts of Russians, as Ukrainian defenders call what is happening, are being reported from the Volchansk direction.
At the moment, in the Volchansk direction, the main fighting is concentrated in the area of the Volchansk farmsteads. The Ukrainian Defense Forces have carried out a series of successful counteroffensive actions on other sections of the front. In particular, the settlements of Sofiivka and Andriivka in the Sumy region have been brought under control.
Ukrainian paratroopers thwarted a Russian assault in the Pokrovsk direction. The enemy threw not only manpower but also tanks and armored vehicles into the meat grinder.
Over the past day, according to reports from the General Staff of the Ukrainian Defense Forces, there have been more than 77 clashes in the Pokrovsk direction, the highest number, and the main efforts of the occupiers are focused on the flanks of the Pokrovsk front. They are trying to break through the positions of the Ukrainian defense forces near the settlement of Rodinske in the Dobropilia direction and accordingly near the settlement of Hryshin.
The GUAR fighters carried out a successful operation in the Zaporizhzhia direction. A Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance group entered the enemy's rear near the Kakhovka reservoir. During the combat mission, the military intelligence operatives eliminated 2 occupiers, wounded 2 others, and captured 2 more, later obtaining valuable information from them. The occupiers do not choose life in Humilyated. In this footage, 2 Russians, after being wounded by the Ukrainian armed forces, finished each other off, most likely unable to withstand the emotional pressure on the battlefield.
At the moment, the occupiers are using the difficult terrain to redeploy their personnel in this direction. This significantly complicates the ability of Ukraine's defense forces to neutralize the assault groups of the Russian occupiers. The fighting is taking place directly in the settlement, but the information from the Russian occupiers about establishing full control over the settlement does not correspond to reality. It should be noted that the intensification in the Humilyated direction is being used by the occupiers solely for informational and political purposes. They are in dire need of demonstrating tactical successes along the line of contact.
The United Kingdom has confirmed the delivery to Ukraine of 13 Raven air defense missile systems and 2 Greyhawk prototypes. In addition, the delivery of additional Greyhawk systems is expected in the near future. This is reported by the Ukraine Defense Journal, which adds that the systems are intended to provide short-range protection against drones, aircraft, and helicopters operating near the front line.
Trump goes on the offensive against Putin. The US president has given the green light to crippling sanctions that could devastate Russia's economy back in a bill introduced by Senator Lindsey Graham. What happens next? Let's take a closer look.
While Moscow continues to pretend it's ready for negotiations, Washington is moving from words to instruments of pressure. US President Donald Trump has given the green light to a bipartisan bill to strengthen sanctions against Russia. The decision was announced by Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, one of the authors of the document. According to him, the bill had been in preparation for several months and has now received the political approval of the White House.
This is a very timely decision, because Ukraine is making concessions for the sake of peace, while Putin only talks, continuing to kill innocent people.
The key idea of the bill is to strike not only at Russia itself, but also at those who continue to finance its war, terrorizing and killing civilians every day. The document grants the US president the authority to punish countries that buy cheap Russian oil, thereby fueling Putin's war machine. First and foremost, China, India, and Brazil could fall under these sanctions. The bill opens up direct levers of pressure on these countries, from financial restrictions to trade sanctions, in order to force them to reconsider their cooperation with Moscow in the energy sector.
The US is still making attempts in one way or another to win over the Russian Federation. This plan is not being put on hold because it is part of the US confrontation with China. Another part of the issue is that it isn't working, but the US has not admitted that they will abandon these attempts. These attempts may be more friendly or less friendly.
But instead of stopping, the Kremlin is looking for a loophole to bargain. According to Greiter, the Russian dictator hopes to persuade the American president to trade Venezuela for Ukraine. The Kremlin raised this issue back during Trump's first presidential term.
I don't subscribe to this version. I don't adhere to this version, because the first term and the second term are very different in this context. Back then it was, let's make a trade so that Putin doesn't attack. But now Putin has attacked, and attacked in such a way that he actually doesn't know how to get out of it. And before this, it was a very powerful state. In Trump's mind, I mean, invincible, nuclear, with a large army, a big economy, vast territory, everything just the way Trump likes it. Everything is big. But all that bigness ran up against Ukraine, which, from Trump's perspective, is rather small. And it forced everything in the world to change.
That's why today, dividing the world the way Putin and Trump wanted to during Trump's first term as president is no longer possible.
The US is now confronting a kind of global alternative system that operates bypassing the US, bypassing their sanctions, and is almost entirely tied to Chinese industry. and almost all Venezuelan oil, Iranian oil, and to a significant extent Russian oil as well. These are resources for Chinese oil refining. And so, with this global empire, so to speak, which is scattered across different jurisdictions, which, as we recently saw in the incident with the ship, is capable of changing flags, where countries, so to speak, back each other up. This global empire remains, and it will continue to exist. Let's put it this way. It's not something the US can simply ignore, because in principle, this global empire, with certain efforts and certain capabilities, will increasingly roll back the role of the US on the international stage.
Today, Ukraine has proven that even against a superpower, it is capable of dictating the rules. And now it is Kyiv and its allies who are determining what the terms of peace will be. And the tighter the West turns the screws, the faster Eritrea will decide to make concessions or lose the last remnants of its influence on the world stage.
Putin has instructed the government, the central bank, and regional authorities to restore the pace of Russia's economic growth in 2026 and to increase tax collections. Both goals are hardly achievable, experts say, including those loyal to the authorities. More on how Russia's economy is sliding into the abyss coming up.
To restore the economy and increase taxes, these are the two goals that the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has set for the government, the central bank, and regional authorities for 2026. Such tasks are barely achievable, as even experts loyal to the authorities admit.
By the end of 2025, it was already clear that the Russian economy was facing major problems. And if, let's put it this way, in the middle of 2025, only a few commentators, who weren't even opposition figures, were talking about a technical recession, then by the end of 2025, even economists close to the authorities, such as the Center for Macroeconomic Analysis and Short-Term Forecasting, headed by the younger brother of Russia's defense minister Belousov, were already saying that there would be a recession in 2026.
Since the beginning of 2025, Russia's GDP growth has been steadily slowing down. It was 1.4% in the first quarter, 1.1% in the second, and only 0.6% in the third. Russian economists predicted that the economy would enter 2026 with zero growth and inevitable stagnation across all sectors except the military.
For the fourth quarter in a row, Russia was in the negative. Most likely, well, I think they'll officially report plus 0.1, but in reality, it was a negative. And as for 2026, yes, it's likely that the entire year will see GDP decline, meaning production is falling. Statements that some sectors are showing success, well, maybe a few isolated ones will, but overall the negatives outweigh them.
A downturn, at least for the first and second quarters of 2026, instead of the 1% growth that Putin is ordering the Ministry of Economy to achieve, has long been predicted by Russian economists.
People have gotten used to paying not only with cash these days, but also with credit cards. Previously, for 25 years before this, there was never an extra charge in Russia for paying with credit cards instead of cash. Now, that's a thing of the past. Paying by credit card now means you have to pay a tax. According to calculations by Sberbank of Russia, as announced by its head German Gref, this means a loss of 200 billion rubles for Russian citizens.
To fill the budget with revenue to finance Putin's war, the authorities, of course, plan to take it from the pockets of Russians.
This will lead to more and more businesses shutting down. There is already a trend of businesses closing in Russia, and the statistics show that a great many businesses are shutting down. And if there is an even greater increase in fiscal pressure, as Putin is talking about, it will mean that even more different enterprises will be forced to close.
Starting in 2025, Russia will begin to feel the first consequences of tightening by the EU in the form of fuel shortages at gas stations. In 2026, it is quite possible that salaries will not be paid due to a lack of funds, which will lead to the shutdown of production in most industries.
That's all for now. Stay with us to be the first to know what's happening right now. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.